To take a closer look at the latest details of the province's plan, I'm joined by Brett Dolter, who is an ecological economist at the University of Regina. Thank you so much for joining me today. What was your initial reaction to the plan?
Well, glad to see they've now put some numbers to the discussed performance intensity standards. The first reaction was, oh, this doesn't look too hard for them to meet. Any given industry that's meeting a 5% intensity improvement over 12 years, that's pretty achievable. Some of them have 10 to 15% goals, but they seem achievable and potentially maybe too weak.
Mm-hmm. So who does this impact when we're looking forward?
So this was a policy aimed at the big industry players that aren't generating electricity and also aren't the upstream oil and gas folks. So it'd be businesses like Evraz, the steel mill, the upgrader, the co-op refinery. So some of those big businesses that didn't fit into those other categories. Now they're looking at, okay, what improvements can they make to make them more efficient and lower their emissions intensity?
Mm-hmm. So how will this protect industries in the worldwide marketplace?
Well, yeah, so when you look at what the regulation does, so it looks at reducing emission intensity. Now that doesn't necessarily mean reducing emissions. So if you get 5% more efficient in producing output, but you produce 10% more, your emissions have gone up by 5%. So for industry, a hard cap would likely be tougher to meet. They'd have to find ways to reduce their emissions in absolute terms. This gives them a relative emissions target. And so they're having to reduce and become more efficient per unit output, but not necessarily cap their total emissions. So that should mean that it's not going to have as big of an impact on their business, not as big of an impact on the prices they have to charge for their products. And in the current environment we live in, where we have the United States without a big federal climate change plan, that might be necessary in the short term in order to protect those industries, make sure they stay in the country.
So expanding on that, mentioning that, I mean, there's a difference in making efficiencies as well as just the actual number. Do you think that this will kind of put us on the right track to meeting our obligations to reduce emissions?
Well, we know federally, Canada has agreed to reduce emissions by 30% below 2005 levels by 2030. So we've got 12 years left. And we look at Saskatchewan's numbers, our emissions have gone up since 2005. Which means right now we would need to reduce emissions by about 28 megatons, 28 million tons of CO2 by 2030 relative to where we are now. What the provincial government has said, they have these three parts now to their plan for emission reduction. Electricity is going to be cleaner. They're going to try to capture methane and keep that from going into the atmosphere. And now this heavy industry regulation. All those together only add up to 12 megatons. So it's kind of like trying to return a football, you get to the halfway mark and you haven't got the touchdown yet. So we still have half the field to cover here with our emission reductions. And we got to think about where to look for that. And it could be in the unregulated sectors. We've got 42% of our emissions that aren't regulated. So that includes the transportation sector. And we've seen big increases in personal transportation as well as freight. It includes any existing buildings, not a lot of regulation applied there or incentives applied there. It includes agriculture and finding ways to use less fuel, find processes that release fewer emissions. So we still have areas of Saskatchewan's economy and society that we can look to reduce emissions. And what I'd like to see now is the province fill in that gap, take the touchdown over the final down and yard line and get us where we need to go.
Well, there is still lots to do and lots to see coming with the plan as it comes forward. So thank you so much for breaking this all down for us today.
Thank you.